This presentation is based on the results extracted from the research project I had the pleasure to lead, and I thank all people who participated, and also all collaborators in the research project, because without all of them any of this could have been possible. So I would like to point out, I would like to mention about the Spanish educational system, and specifically I'm going to, to focus my dissertation, I wish it could be my dissertation, to focus my presentation on the specific transition, between higher junior secondary education, which is compulsory in Spain, and to higher secondary education, which is comprised of two courses, and they are prior to university courses. So just in order to have a picture about what happens here in Spain in terms of women participation in technology-related subjects, I want to mention that here at the secondary education, in higher secondary education, the students are urged to choose between different tracks. So as you can see here, women, despite being more in higher secondary education, they are less represented in the technological track. This pattern also happens in higher education, and mostly we see how women are mostly highly represented in humanities and social sciences related studies, and also they are underrepresented in technological related studies. Concerning the presence of women in ICT-related studies, on ICTs, we see how women are especially underrepresented in computer science, despite being, considerably represented in ICTs, in telecommunications engineering, sorry. I'm trying to go fast. I hope to be clear enough. So, just making a global review on the literature and the empirical evidences. It's been found. This picture of women underrepresentation of women in technological studies has been confirmed by empirical evidences, and it's been found how boys tend to aspire to technology-related studies, and women tend to aspire to humanities and social sciences, and are less likely to pursue women are less likely to pursue math and physical sciences, physical science-related careers. Boys have traditionally been perceived as more gifted, more talented in math and physical science, and whilst on the contrary, girls have been thought to be more talented in verbal abilities than boys. At the same time, girls' lower perception of their math and technical abilities, has been a highly predictor of their lower engagement and enrollment in ICT and in technology-related studies. Also, the negative image of IT professionals and the IT profession seemed to discourage women and other students, not only women, as we were mentioning, from pursuing technology and ICT-related studies. Also girls have been found to hold more negative attitudes towards computers and value computers and computer-related subjects less than their male counterparts. Female students are more likely to value people-oriented careers, whilst male students are more likely to place value on competitive careers and careers involving the use of machinery and maths. Boys also receive more encouragement to pursue technology-related studies than girls. On the contrary, girls are more encouraged to pursue other humanities and social sciences and health sciences-related studies. Rural students, specifically in Spain or specifically in Catalonia, where this project was carried out, have less access to computers than urban students. So that's why in this presentation I'm going to also consider this variable as a variable, structural variable, to take into consideration in order to predict the pursuit of technology-related studies. Socioeconomic studies, according to the PISA and other studies, even in Spain, so high influence, in children's access and use of ICT at home. So mostly those students from low SES have less access to computers and the use of ICTs at home. And also the transition, the educational transition from higher or junior secondary education to higher secondary education is a crucial transition period that could explain why women are dropping and are less likely to pursue certain studies. Well, having this picture and having these theoretical and empirical aspects on mind, the main aim of this presentation is to analyze or to look at the main contextual and structural and psychosocial factors that influence student choices at two different points, as I mentioned before. Yes, at junior secondary education, when the students are 15 years old, and at higher secondary education when students are 16 years old. So, as here the sample is described, so at time one, 900 students participated. More or less, there were the same amount of girls and boys. The mean of age was 15 years, and they were just enrolled in the last course of compulsory secondary education, junior secondary education, and they were from mostly from the metropolitan area of Barcelona, and they came from intermediate SES. At time two, 775 participants were participating in the study, and also more girls participated in this wave, in the second wave. The mean of age was 16 years old, and here they were just enrolled in the different. They had chosen the specific educational track of the higher secondary education in Spain. And as you can see, almost 56 were enrolled in the technology and science track. So most of them, at time one, came from the metropolitan area of Barcelona, and they also, around 70% of them came from intermediate ECS. We try also only to recruit students from public institutions, not private institutions, which also makes a difference, and we can also discuss about it later, but I don't want to go deeper into this because I want to focus mostly on the results. So just keeping this in mind and trying to find just a model that could explain, which variables are influencing the intention of students to pursue ICT-related studies, I'm going to focus on the last model, and mostly it specifies how most boys, also students who have received advice to pursue ICT-related studies, and who have a high self-concept of computer ability and who perceive a high utility of computer classrooms for their future professional career, and also who are less interested in pursuing a socially oriented occupation, are more likely to pursue ICT-related studies. This is with students at time 1 when they were 15 years old, as I mentioned before. At time 2, I have to say that this is not a longitudinal perspective. I mean, the longitudinal perspective would be only counting, those students who were both at time 1 and at time 2. This is only just students who were at both time periods, but without crossing, their data and flowing them up in this way, in this longitudinal way. So, if we can see, I mean, as we saw before, the advice to pursue ICT-related studies continues to be one of the most important variables in predicting the pursuit of ICT-related studies, together with self-concept of computer ability, and when introducing in blocks the computer aptitudes and the variable gender loses its influence, its significant influence, and here those students who come from urban areas are more likely to pursue ICT-related studies than those who come from urban areas. Are more likely, students from urban areas are more likely to pursue ICT-related studies than students from rural areas. And also students from intermediate ECS, SES are more likely to pursue ICT-related studies than students from other socioeconomic status. Sorry if I'm a little bit, fast, but I want to keep the track of the time. So here, as we can see, the advice received to pursue ICT-related studies is congruent with the self-concept of computer ability, and is something that we could expect. Those students who have been encouraged by other significant people to pursue ICT-related studies have also high self-concept of computer ability. As you can imagine, boys are more encouraged than girls to pursue ICT-related studies, and also they have higher self-concept of computer ability than girls. Contrary to expectations, and as I tried to mention before, self-concept of computer ability and math performance do not play an important role in the prediction of ICT-related studies, which has to do perhaps with the conception of misconception that students have about ICT-related studies. We can discuss about this later if you wish, later on. Computer aptitudes do not play an important role in this prediction because there are other variables apart from them that play a higher role, higher importance, higher relevance in this prediction. Occupational motivations with the course of the time do not play any specific role, only at time 1. SCS and place of origin play a very important role in that sense at time 2, when the students have already chosen the specific track in higher secondary education. And these findings, as I mentioned before, confirm this important, relevant role that the transition between junior secondary education to higher secondary education plays. And I think here in this context, and it also suggests different strategies to be implemented in the educational level in terms of, role models. Well, we know that this is a vicious cycle. Women are underrepresented in this field, so women don't have role models, and girls specifically don't have role models at the schools. And this is a very important point, and we can also talk about this later on in the group discussion or wherever you consider that is appropriate. it could be very, very interesting to continue collecting data, and don't always, we're talking about this right now with one of my colleagues who are participating in this project, because we are thinking of continuing collecting data in order to gather more knowledge and to see how the ontogenies of the gender differences go further, or how it's concretely developed with the course of the time, and in comparison to the different transition periods, and extending as I mentioned there, and to broaden the scope of analysis to other transition periods, such as the transition between primary school to secondary school, which could be also very, very interesting. Also, it could be very, very interesting to carry out further comparative cross-cultural research, apart from the one we are just carrying out with Rachel. So it would be very, very, very interesting to compare these results with other educational systems which share or don't share certain specificities, with the Spanish educational system. And I always have in mind, because this is something that I'm in my research and also in the dissertation, because this work is the continuation of my dissertation work. I also wonder why and how to increase girls' and computer ability, because boys always brag about their abilities in computers and in math and in technology, and how this could influence the perception and the way girls also deal and use technologies. Well, and to final, I'm talking about interventions. Johan has mentioned about particular interventions, and these are just ideas, for future intervention. I'm sure that there are many other ideas that we could, pose in this conference, and we can argue about them. And I think that particular interventions should be carried out with parents and students. I forgot telling you that this project was a broader project, and it also had a specific also focus on the way parents and secondary teachers perceive their role in the study choices that their students and children make. So I think that we should do something related to target our intervention strategies to parents and teachers' misconceptions about ICTs and occupations and careers, and also about the expectations about their children. So thank you so much for your attention, and I hope to have been clear enough.
Thank you very much. This presentation is a brief summary of research in progress that we're currently working on in the Gender and ICT research team. It forms part of the UK Spain Comparative Research project that Juliet mentioned before, looking at the shaping of women's ICT professional trajectories throughout the life cycle and the public policy response to this in both countries. This presentation specifically looks at the choice of ICT in secondary education in the UK. So if we take a brief look at some of the data for ICT GCSE, ICT A-level and computing A-level in the UK for 2005 and 2010. For those of you who don't know the UK system, A-levels are normally taken at age 18, at post-obligatory secondary education, and GCSEs taken at age 16. So if we have a look here, we can see how girls are underrepresented in ICT studies across the board. This is data of those who've actually sat the exams. And in terms of our overall numbers, we can actually see a dramatic decrease in both the numbers of boys and girls taking ICT studies from 2005 to 2010. If we look a bit more closely at the GCSE ICT and A-level ICT, we can see a very slight increase in girls' representation from 2005 to 2010, despite the overall numbers dropping. So if we actually look at the numbers involved, we can see that there's actually been a 41% drop in the numbers of people enrolling, taking GCSE ICT. There's been an 18% drop in those taking ICT A-level and a 44% drop in those taking A-level computing. Now, this is important to bear. It's important to bear these figures in mind as we can see how this landscape has shaped policy interventions in gender and ICT at the secondary level. We're going to discuss this. So, basic overview of some of the major issues identified in the gender and ICT in education research and intervention programmes. Research and intervention programmes attempt to refute stereotypes, both of a gendered nature and a professional nature. Yet, they also tend to feed into stereotypical gendered characteristics. So we've got this binary notions of gender difference, and a more nuanced and plural understanding of gender is absent, really. We also have quite a contradictory evidence base. Catherine Tomt, in a paper, a briefing paper for the OECD, notes how the field has been driven by a perception that boys' use and attitudes are the norm, and we're constantly using this yardstick from which to judge and look at girls' interaction with ICT. There also seems to be a lack of research looking at the influence of wider cultural and contextual factors. So the majority of research looking at gender ICT in education at the secondary level tends to revolve around the differences between boys and girls and their relationship to ICT in terms of learners' performances, motivation, attitudes towards computers and skills, confidence and self-efficacy, time consumption, frequency and patterns of ICT use, the impact of teachers, parents and peers on choice of study, and also the use of ICT for leisure has been recognised as a key area where differences between boys and girls are most striking. I'm going to quickly look at motivation and attitudes towards computer and skills and confidence in terms of the UK empirical base. First, I'm going to set the context in terms of the UK policy context in terms of gender, ICT in schools. Phil Bannister, who's the Strategy and Policy Director of BECTA, which is the government agency, which apparently leads the national drive to ensure effective and innovative use of technology through learning, has identified how there's a relative absence of policy focused directly on ICT and gender in schools. But he does identify the implicit gender dimension, which is the potential of technology to improve boys' educational performance. Now, this is operating in a context where there's been a persistent a recognition of an underachievement of boys, which has been the major preoccupation at a policy level. He identifies there are various different strategies at the policy level that are implementing this approach. So, for example, personal learning. The use of technology to expand learner choice over subject place and place of learning has actually been identified as benefiting boys without disadvantaging girls. Now, this is quite interesting in terms of the language that's being used. There's also been an emerging push for technology in the home, and as it's been identified, boys seem to be more enthusiastic users out of school. And also risks have been highlighted as being greater for boys in terms of excessive gaming. There's also been a push towards computer games, and there's been a lot of research and development looking at how games-based learning can be developed in the educational setting. Again, propensities to benefit boys and what we know about differential use of computer games in terms of gendered use. So the basic picture of ICT and education at the secondary level seems to be focusing on boys' attainment. In terms of UK empirical research, and going back to the some of the issues that I identified earlier, if we look at motivation, It's been identified that ICT motivates girls and boys differently. So there's a Department of Education and Skills study that saw that the motivational effect of ICT is seen to benefit boys more greatly. And people have actually identified how the strategy behind this was to help boys work more like girls. So again, this fits in with this notion of trying to boost boys' achievement. Boys have also identified, boys have said that they found ICT more motivating than more traditional learning methods, whereas girls have said, actually, it makes no difference. There's also a big debate about whether this difference actually closes with age, as Hayward et al. Recognises or purports. Passy has identified that this might be explained by lack of ICT toys at home, whereas more in line with more international research, Kitchen et al. Identify that actually motivation increases with differences in motivational effects of ICT actually increases with age. So there's some Mori research commissioned by eSkills that says at age 10 there seem to be no gender differences, but between age 11 and 14, that's when the stereotypes of IT being geekish, nerdy and boring actually kicks in. And Aubrey and Dahl have identified that the actual design of educational software and content with a greater number of male characters might be one of the explanations for this. And Cooper backs this up with his work with her work in the US, looking at the focus on boys' achievement in ICT policy and how design of actual educational software can feed into point scoring and competition, thereby implicitly favouring boys. In terms of attitude and confidence, most studies tend to find that girls' confidence is lower. This feeds into what Mila was explaining about her study in Spain. North and Noyes assessed computer attitudes and cognition of 104 children aged 11 and 12, self-reported questionnaires in England, and they found the impact of psychological gender did not influence attitudes nor cognition towards computers. But there's also contradictory evidence here, as Colley compared boys and girls at age 11, 12 and 15 and 16, their perceptions of the best and the worst aspects of computing, and they found gender differences at both stages. And then Kennewell and Morgan have found that there's evidence that computer gaming can generate a self-efficacy with technology and increase attainment. Again, this has implicit implications in terms of gender. And despite a policy focus on gender and education that tends to be orientated towards boys' achievement, in 2005, eSkills, a non-for-profit employer-led organisation, set up computer clubs for girls. Now, it's an employer-developed initiative. Companies like BA, IBM UK, Cisco Systems and NTV were all involved. And this was developed as a response to the gender imbalance in the ICT industry. It aimed to get 11 to 14-year-old girls more interested in computers in a single-sex environment. It basically consists of out-of-school clubs where girls developed e-learning and offline learning projects. Initially, the subject matter were things that were designed to appeal to girls, for example, designing and creating magazine covers, gardens, fashion show, but recently there's been a recognition that they needed to broaden the topics. So, for example, they've been studying things like crime scene investigation and nature and the environment. The girls involved in these clubs have been learning about programming, designing websites, creating databases and using Micromedia Flash authoring tools. The project has been deemed a success in various quarters as over 125,000 girls have been involved, but unfortunately it's too early to measure the actual impact. Although a report by eSkills in 2008 said that 62% of their members stated that they were actually more likely to want to work in a career using technology. Yeah, computer clubs for girls, however, has now been changed to Connect, Create and Go to include boys in the after school clubs. eSkills state three main reasons for this change. They wanted the club to fit into the national curriculum, so they needed it to be gender neutral. They also state that teachers asked them to let boys become involved. And also, if we go back to the data that I showed at the beginning, there was a recognition of the overall drop of IT enrolments. It's also congruent with the current policy interest in boys. So where does this leave girls and the underrepresentation of women in ICT professions? Well, the effects of letting boys into the computer clubs will need to be studied in terms of not only the beneficial effects on boys, but also effects on girls' participation within the clubs. And if current policy is anything to go by, this element will become superseded by a focus on how ICTs can motivate boys to achieve.